welcome to the first of Connect's 4-part swing clinic. We are covering this over the next 4 weeks. We've got 4 editions for you to keep you swinging while the golf courses are closed in Ontario. We are going to focus today on hip mobility. All right, the reason why hip mobility is so important when it comes to the swing is that you need to be able to completely coil in your backswing as rotating the pelvis back over the feet, and then in your foreswing you need to be able to open completely towards the target, and that mobility comes almost entirely from the hips. So that's the main engine for your swing, and we find that it leads to some problems down the road if you don't have that mobility. So we're going to focus on some internal rotation, some external rotation, and some extension. So really, we've got 3 stretches and 1 drill to lock it all in. You can follow along with this video. It's going to take about 15 minutes, or you can take snippets wherever you need them. We've also got a downloadable version and just exercise by exercise up on our blog, so feel free to check that out. Without further ado, let's start our first stretch. The first stretch that we're going to work on is called an elevated pigeon stretch. So a pigeon stretch is one that comes to us from yoga, and it really helps us work on external rotation of the hip. So for this, you're going to need an elevated surface. It doesn't matter if it's a chair, a table, probably not a counter, you're not that tall, or a couch, anything like that would work. Arm of a couch is a really comfortable way to do this stretch. And so the way we're going to start, standing in front of your surface, you're going to bring one leg up. And then what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to keep your shin kind of parallel to the surface that you're on. So you ideally want to have your foot and your knee on the surface. You're going to hop your other leg back. All right, for me, you just wiggle it back, and then you're going to just hang out into this position. You can drop a little lower into the stretch, or you can lean forwards over the box. Okay, so you should feel this stretch right through the back of the hip. If I switch legs and show you on the other side, you should feel this stretch right through the very back of the hip. It shouldn't be pinchy through the front. So you want to sink into that stretch, really spend some time there. You can kind of rock your hips back and forth like I'm doing. You can sink farther down, or you can drop your chest forwards. All of those are good options. So you can pause this video here and try that stretch. Set a timer for 2 minutes on each side, and then we'll move on to the next one. Our next stretch is better known as a couch stretch. It's everybody's least or maybe most favorite stretch, but it's definitely got a love-hate relationship with most people. So what you're going to need is a pad and a wall. You can use a pillow for this, that's just fine. So what you're going to do here, come down on all fours, and the difficulty of this stretch is determined by how close your knee is to the wall. So if I ram my knee way up in there, that's going to be about as hard as this stretch can be. So I'm going to start 6 inches or so away from the wall. Then what I'm going to do is bring my other knee forwards, and I'm going to come up in this kind of half lunge position. So what I'm concentrating on here is squeezing my glute on this back side, driving my hip forward. I'm going to get a lot of stretch right up through this front part of my leg. And this is unfun, but this is to work on hip extension. So you can lean farther forward into the stretch. You really want to make sure you're not getting that range from your lower back, so you're not just arching your shoulders back. Really breathe in this stretch. Lunging forwards. You can also leave your hands on the ground. That's also an option. If you're just starting to get into this stretch, that's just fine. You can hunt side to side, but eventually the goal is to walk your hands up to your feet or up to your knee and hang out there. So that's one side. I want you to spend 2 minutes on either side, pause this video here, and circle back for our next stretch. Next up, we have what we call a 90-90 position. So this is going to improve hip internal and external rotation. You get to do both at the same time. So what you're going to do, have a seat on the floor on a yoga mat, and you're going to line your hips up so they're kind of at 90 degrees to each other. Then you're going to turn one leg back. Now, might be a little bit difficult to see from that angle, but I've got a 90-degree angle here, here, and here. So really it should be a 90-90-90 position, but we'll call it 90-90 because that's easier. So now from here, what I want you to try to do is really drive this knee down into the ground. Okay, so what you should be feeling is a little bit of stretch in the back of this hip, and you're gonna feel a whole bunch of stretch in the front of this hip. So this hip is relatively an internal rotation, and this hip is relatively an external rotation. If you're just starting out, you might have to have your hands back behind you. That's fine. You can hang out back there. You can lean side to side in that position, trying to ultimately get both butt cheeks down to the ground, which is a really difficult position to get into. If you want the more advanced version of this, or if you're already on the bendier side, what you might try is adding a little bit of a muscle contraction into it. So that means you would try to lift that back foot, which obviously I'm not super good at, or drive that front knee down. Okay, so you could ultimately, as you get really good at this, try to lift that foot up, but that's quite a bit more difficult to do. So you can just get nice and active in that position. So think about driving both knees down, and you can rotate over either hip. Okay, you might want to use pillows to prop your knees up if you're just getting started in this position, but we're going to do it this way, and then you can easily flip over to do the same thing on the other side. You are going to notice you have a favorite hip. For me, I don't love when this hip is an internal rotation, which for me as a right-handed golfer is not helpful because I need full internal rotation to finish my swing. So that's something that I need to work on. So I want you to spend about 2 minutes on either side again. You can pause the video here, and then we'll get back together. We've got one more drill to do, and then you are done for the day. All right, everyone, our last exercise for today is a drill to help you lock in that internal and external rotation that you just gained. So you want to start with your feet in your swing stance that you'd use driver, irons. So somewhere in around shoulder width, potentially a little bit wider. Leave that up to you. If you are barefoot and your feet are nice and sticky and they'll stick to the floor, that's great. I would recommend not doing this in socks because you do want your foot to be planted, so you could also do this in your golf shoes. Also a good component of a warm-up. So what we're gonna do is bend the knees just a little bit, and you're gonna first concentrate on rotating back through your range. And then, so without really thinking about swinging or anything, you're gonna rotate back through, come up onto the front foot, and really think about sticking that landing at the end. So squeezing through the hips, okay, and come back. So I'm using kind of the full range that I would take up in my backswing, and then coming forwards through into my foreswing. So the other thing that you can do here that can be really, really helpful if you are feeling a little bit tight through that front hip is actually step through. So you're gonna come back into that backswing again, and then you're gonna come through, leave that foot behind, and step. Okay, so really that's pulling you into quite a bit more range. So you can try that from the backswing, or you can just try it from standing, step through, and come back, and step through, and come back. So we're really working on mobilizing that front hip. If you want to add an extra layer of difficulty to this, all you're going to do, take the toes, turn them in. Okay, so now I'm a little duck footed on that front leg. Feet are a little slippery. So duck foot on the front leg, and then same thing. You can either come over, and you'll notice it's a lot harder for me to get my hips through when I duck foot on that side. So turn the feet in, rotate over, come back. You can again go over and step and come back. Over and step and come back. So if you're tight on that front hip, this is a really, really good one to finish off the 4 stretches that we've just done. So it's also kind of cool because for that extension stretch we did with the knee behind the body, that movement actually goes with internal rotation of the hips. So if you improve that extension, or if you felt like you're really tight there, stretching that more can help get that lead leg internal rotation, so that when you go to swing, you've got the range of motion to square your hips around to the target. So again, spend a couple of minutes on that one, see how you feel. You might even go back, if you do this another day, try it before and after and see how you feel. But definitely give those 4 stretches a go. Let us know how they go. I would love to hear about it, but we will see you when you are done.